Good evening, I'm Ziad Parvez.
And I'm Geraldine Zinn.
The 2018-2019 national budget was announced on the 28th of July. Since then, much has been said about the various aspects of the budget, and to discuss this, we have with us the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Public Enterprises, Civil Service and Communications, the Honorable Ayaz Said Qayyum. Sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We'll get right into it. In the lead up to the budget announcement, there was a lot of talking about how it would be a family-oriented budget. And when it was announced, we saw that there was a lot of focus on the family unit. So can you explain to us why the government decided to put so much of a focus on building families?
Well, in fact, we've been building families all these years. As you know, that we've introduced various reforms to social welfare. We've introduced various other changes to the law, whether it's Domestic Violence Act, or whether it's in respect of various other laws applicable to the family, but also protecting members of the family. And as you know, that also last year we announced the increase in the income tax threshold that of course assists families too, the reduction of VAT overall. This is part and parcel of an ongoing project, an ongoing focus of the Fiji First government. And in this particular budget, we've of course focused, for example, on paternity leave, introduction of paternity leave, I should say, the increase in the number of weeks of maternity leave, and of course bringing in the family care leave. These are sort of significant changes, but also a recognition of the fact that we need to be able to address these issues from a legal perspective, but also in respect of ensuring that we have employees that are protected, but also increasing productivity. A lot of people see this as well, productivity will in fact decrease. We argue no. If your employee actually feels that they are being protected by the law and the employer is actually going to give them a certain number of benefits, they'll feel a lot more committed to their workplace, feel a lot more, endeared, if you like, to their work environment. So this is part and parcel of that. Of course, as you know, the other announcements we made is in respect of education. So all of this sort of filters into ensuring that we have a stable family environment. Because when you have a stable family environment, of course, you feel a lot more comfortable, you're a lot more at ease with your own self, with the environment that you come from when you go to work. And that, of course, leads to a better society and a better country.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the paternity leave, a first for Fiji. Another interesting initiative within the ambit of all this was the $1,000 allowance given to new mothers. And Geraldine, I'm sure you're also familiar with some of the claims on social media that say that the government is essentially trying to get people to have more babies without thinking of the long-term effects. What would you say to this?
Well, frankly, at the moment, our growth rate is very low, 0.6%. So we're not actually, having a population burst problem. But that's besides the point. The point is that if you look at this $1,000, what is it being used for? And I'll give you a bit of rationale behind it. So essentially, it's targeted to only families that earn less than $30,000 a year. Firstly, it's for them. Secondly, the $1,000 won't be used all up at once. There are certain conditions. First condition, of course, the family has to have $30,000 or less. The second condition is that you have to have a birth certificate. A few years ago, we did a sweep around Fiji. There was something like 25 to 27,000 Fijians that did not have a birth certificate. There were some people as old as 55, 60 years old that did not have a birth certificate. So they've spent their entire life without a birth certificate. What this will do is actually encourage families immediately after the child is born to go and get a birth certificate. Then we know exactly, where the babies are, they've been registered. At the moment what happens is that when the child is about to go to school, then you have these long queues outside the birth death and marriages office. We actually have to open it late till night, on Saturdays, on weekends, and everywhere else, not just in Suva. So of course we no longer will have to do that if people actually register the children at birth. There won't be this mad rush. So we're actually saving money from that perspective. We're making things a lot more easier. Then when they have the birth certificate, then the account is actually going to be opened under the child's name. And the mother can access the money, the first $500. They may want to buy things for the baby, etc. Or indeed for the mother in terms of her nourishment or the baby's diapers, whatever the case may be. Now, the second $500, they cannot touch that until the child actually goes to year one. Now that, of course, families do need that. Sometimes they may want to buy things for the child when they go to school. Now what happens in the meantime is that the account does not attract any fees. The banks that will participate in it won't charge any fees, and in fact they'll pay interest. Because remember that $500 actually sits there in the account, so banks can actually use that in the meantime, and then come when it's time for usage, they can actually obviously supply that and they'll earn a bit of interest. The wider perspective, of course, is that we're trying to encourage a culture of savings. So if the child has an account open under the child's name, the child becomes 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, then somebody gives money, say, oh, might as well put money in the child's account. It's a form of savings, we're encouraging that. So that's part and parcel of that. And in fact, a lot of people have welcomed it with open arms. And we're not giving it willy-nilly to anybody. It's obviously, payable only for those people who earn below $30,000 a year.
On that note, with it being $30,000, you said it's for the family. Does that mean just for the parents itself, combined income of $30,000?
It's for the household, yeah.
The whole household?
Yes.
Okay, so that would include, say, for example, if you and I were to be married and we have parents and we all work, and if the combined income of the entire house is more than $30,000, then we're not...
You won't qualify. In the same way, for example, we have an electricity subsidy, right? It's for the household. So if the household, they have one account, if the household lives together, 4 or 5 family members, and they have a combined income more than $30,000, they don't qualify.
On that note, looking at family care leave that's been introduced now, some may say that it's not a good idea to allow people to take leave from work just to go home and look after either themselves or their family members or so, because we already have sick leave. What are your thoughts on that?
Sick leave is for you. It's a personal leave for you when you are sick. So I don't take sick leave if my child is sick. I can only take sick leave when I am sick. But we have a lot of people, for example, who have children, who may have parents, they need looking after. I mean, for example, you're at work one day and, assuming you're married, your husband has an accident. And there's nobody there. Your extended family all live in Lambasa. So somebody needs to be by his bedside. So this is the leave what it is there for. Your child gets sick. It's an acknowledgement of the fact that currently the practice is a lot of people actually take leave because precisely for those reasons, but they take it from the annual leave. Or they take leave without pay. Now, this is only 1 week, frankly, and what you're entitled to, only 1 week. We, as you know, as announcer, also have cut off one of the public holidays, which is the sports day. So, this is some form of encouragement for the employers to say, well, okay, these people won't be away for another, 1 week, taken away one public holiday. But we've also said that there'll be 150% tax deduction for the leave for paternity leave and also for family care leave. So employers actually don't necessarily get out of pocket. So everybody wins.
Thank you for that clarification. There's also a lot being said about the economic growth and national debt, but we'll get right into that after this break. Welcome back. So this year's national budget estimates $5.5 billion in national debt. Now, given what's being said by some political parties and what's being said on social media, should ordinary Fijians be worried about this amount?
No, you see, that's incorrect to say that, that this year's budget gives you a $5.5 billion debt. That's incorrect. That's cumulative debt. So when the Bainimarama government was appointed in 2007, there's already an existing debt of $2.4, $2.6 billion. That's a cumulative. So, as I've said before, that the Ratumara government that took out debt, and then the Rambuka government came in, they took out debt, they have to pay each other's debt. Then Chaudhry government came in, then the Garasha government came in, they all take out debts. Essentially, Fiji has always run deficits. Like most governments in the world, they all run deficits, right from Japan to US to Canada, everybody else. They all run deficits. So this 5.5 is a cumulative debt. The debt to GDP ratio this time is about 3.5%. The debt from this year is about 400 million. Now, so we have what we call a operating surplus. In other words, the amount of money we make in terms of tax collection, etc. If you take out our operating expenses, we have a surplus, about $800 to $900 million. So we use that surplus then to actually do capital projects. Now, of course, because we have an operating surplus that's higher, that means we have to borrow less. But in the same time, from 2007 till now, we have actually spent more money in infrastructure development than they have spent from 1970 to 2006. Just think about that, it's quite phenomenal. But more interesting point is this. From 1970 to 2006, when they spent every dollar to invest in capex, They borrowed 70 cents, right, out of the $1. With us, we borrow only 30 cents. So it goes to show that we're actually having more surplus, which we use for capital expenditure also. There is a significant difference. Of course, they've said, oh, if you divide the amount of debt we have against the number of people, or debt per capita is high, but also at the same time, the revenue per capita is also increased. Our GDP per capita is now about $12,000. Used to be only $6,000 before. So Fiji's pie has grown. Essentially, a lot of these people are going around spreading misinformation. You see, they're saying, oh, it's $5 billion debt. They don't say how much money is being generated as a result of investing in electricity, water, roads, jetties, roads, all of that. Nor do they talk about the fact that it's a cumulative debt. Nor do they also say that if you actually build for capital projects to increase your productive capacity, it's actually good debt. I'll give you a clear example. The 4-lane road that's been built from Nandi Airport to Namaka, Matintar, etc. Yes, it's being built now. The future generations don't have to build it. It's already built. If we were to wait for them to build it, then the debt and the cost of building is a lot higher. Because if you build something now, it's obviously cheaper to build now than to build it 10 years later. But the fact of the matter is we suddenly increase our productive capacity. Fiji becomes a lot more attractive as a tourism destination. The tourists will say good infrastructure, good roads, good airport, seamless transition through the immigration, customs, etc. Good destination to visit, let's go there. By the way, very good people too, hospitable people. We are competing with the rest of the tourism destinations. I'm giving an example from a tourism perspective. So these are the things we need to look at and think about.
There's some fear being perpetuated online and by political parties about the overseas borrowing that we do. Earlier this month, I guess, SUDELPA leader, Mr. Rambuka, said that China might be taking over some of our public enterprises. How would you respond to that?
It's frankly stupid to say that because anybody who wants to look at the figures will know that our overall debt exposure, if we take our domestic and foreign debt, our debt exposure to the Exim Bank of China is only 10%. And what have we borrowed the money from Exim Bank of China for? Nambolo Draketi Sealing Road, Buddha Bay, Samani Syria, Singatoka Valley Road, Moto, and the public rental housing in Rewai, and also the land subdivision for housing authority. 7 projects. We have not borrowed from the Exim Bank of China since I think 2012. It's silly to say that, you see, because unfortunately this is supposedly somebody who's a former prime minister. Now, nobody can come and take over your airport or ports, etc. if they have not built it, nor do you have a mortgage over it. There's no such thing. So all of this, of course, these debts that have come from Exim Bank of China, they are sovereign debts that we have actually as a government taken out the debt. There's no charge over any property, etc. We have borrowed money also from ADB. We also borrowed money from World Bank. We borrowed money from previously Exim Bank of Malaysia. That debt is paid off. We borrowed money from one of the agricultural organizations. So you see, what is the issue? We have an Exim Bank of India exposure. The Garase government started, for the revamping of the sugar mills. You see, all of this is being put out of context. And I'm afraid, unfortunately, this is what we said previously in Parliament, these people are undermining the Fijian economy for the sake of their own political gain. They're not telling the truth. For their own political gain, they're undermining the economy. They should not do that. Because it should be in everybody's interest, your interest, our interest, everybody outside, even the politician's interest. Do not undermine the economy. Speak the truth about it. Because when you actually utter words, people outside, investors, financial institutions, they all look at it and say, what's happening in this country? If they start believing the nonsense these people are perpetuating, do you think they'll come and invest in Fiji? Do you think we'll have jobs secure in Fiji?
Because this was said to Australian media.
Yeah, of course, he went and pointed to some building that's being built in McGregor Road. The government is not borrowing money for this, private equity. Australians and New Zealanders build hotels in Fiji. They have been building hotels in Fiji. They bring in their own money or they borrow from financial institutions. We've never said the Aussies and the Kiwis are taking over.
Well, that's from SUDELPA leader Sitiveni Rambuka. But looking at what NFP is saying on their website, they have said that this budget is doomed to fail. But how can you say that a budget will fail unless it's been passed by government?
Well, I think you need to ask them that. We're not saying it's going to doom to fail. we obviously think is very good. You can see overwhelming majority of Fijians are actually supporting this budget. You see, unfortunately, again, you see, I think they're becoming very politically hysterical, and perhaps it's an indication of the fact that the budget is a good budget because it appeals to ordinary Fijians. So they're trying to create all this gloom and doom and become quite hysterical about it. If you read some of the comments, it's actually utter nonsense, obfuscation of the facts, obfuscation of the figures. You have independent bodies that have, said our debt situation, for example, is sustainable, is good. IMF, for example, has said that. Recently we had the economist from ANZ. I mean, he's not in anybody's pocket. He's not politically aligned. There's no interest in Fijian politics. But he's made this statement independently as an economist, an international economist. He does not only look at Fiji, he looks at other countries. And he's actually made some wonderful remarks about this. And in fact, he has said that the budget is actually a good budget from the other perspective. He's saying that we could have gone with a sledgehammer and smashed down all the costs to make ourselves look good and say, oh, look, debt has been brought down even further, we're not spending that much money. He said, but we did the right thing. We've actually struck a right balance. Struck a right balance because we need to ensure the productive capacity of the country continues to increase. We need public infrastructure spending also because it creates jobs. We need employment to be created. And as you know, that unemployment now is the lowest it's been in over 20 years. We need to create even more employment for the young people. And you see that this budget, if you look at it also, it's creating a lot of capacity for the young people too.
We'll discuss more on that right after this break.
Welcome back. Now, sir, you've talked about how the ANZ economist Dr. Kishti Sen has said that this budget is actually a good budget. It strikes a right balance, but he's also pointed out a certain few things that could be done to better our revenue, not only increasing agriculture, but also to export, say, for example, education. He's pointed out that we've got excellent universities. We've also got TVET schools and all. And with the budget encouraging those to get into school with TEL scheme in place, and also with the scholarships that are there, would you say that we should look at exporting education and also those who are well trained?
Well, I think he means that there's more opportunities for foreign students to come into Fiji. I understand that's what he means by exporting education. We have, for example, at the moment, Japanese students who come and learn English in Fiji. There's obviously other Pacific Island countries who send their students to Fiji. I mean, one of the things we need to do is, we have to ensure, for example, that the credibility of our courses actually, have international appeal. In the budget, you see, we've announced that all the FNU campuses will be now Wi-Fi hotspotted, as they say, and it'll be geofenced. And so essentially all those 24 campuses in FNU will get the increased speed, will get the bandwidth. So we want our students to be able to go into as much research as possible. Of course, they need to stay away from other stuff. They can upload things, download, material, and just to encourage their learning environment. Now, obviously, if we want to, for example, get into the space of education, export, etc., foreign students, when they see things like that, then they say, okay, this is a good, destination for education. We've also, for example, at the same time, there's opportunities in high school too. I mean, I know that there are some families from Korea who send the students here to learn English and enroll them, in high schools, etc. So again, we've, for example, decided to do a review of the curriculum, decided to do a stock take of all the schools in terms of infrastructure stock take. So there's a huge focus on that. Yes, that's something obviously it's already happening. You can say that we are exporting education with USP, a lot of regional students come here. So that is already happening, but I think he's talking about developing it even further. And we need to obviously get the right infrastructure in place for that.
Well, looking at the piece of the pie, education sector got $1 billion, which is almost, 22% of the budget pie. In comparison to that, the health sector got $382 million. How would you say that education deserves more money compared to health, given, health services have improved, but there's still more room for improvement?
A sign of commitment is not always indicated by the amount of money you put into it. It's whether that actual sector requires that amount of money or not. You need to spend money wisely. For example, we can make huge allocations and look good in terms of the budget and say we've allocated X number of $1 million to get specialist doctors. But if you know you can't get them, then obviously you have to reduce the budget. There's no point having a figure there when you're not going to actually spend it. So similarly with education, obviously there's a need for it. There's a huge amount of money that's been made available through TELS. Also, of course, through the scholarships. We've expanded the number of scholarships available now. So 960 scholarships for the mainstream scholarships that we're offering. But also we've got some special ones now. So for example, there are certain courses that aren't available in Fiji at the undergraduate level. And we've had students in the past, for example, I remember somebody was accepted to study overseas in the undergraduate studies to do genetic engineering. Now, they could not go under the previous TELS and toppers scheme because we do not pay for overseas scholarships. So now we've got an allocation for 20 in specific areas that should people, for example, want to study in those areas, and they get an acceptance letter from overseas universities because we need to build capacity. We don't have enough town planners, we don't have enough architects, Fijian-trained architects, and there's various other areas, in particular in the science areas. So there's initial funding, so funding has been made for that, initial funding. Now, of course, we need to increase that. So education has received a higher, proportion from that perspective because the amount of students now going to university has increased. The amount of students going to technical colleges has increased. In fact, the amount of students going to school, period, in primary, secondary has increased because of the fact that it's truly free education. I mean, Rambuka made a statement, nonsensical statement the other day saying, my government brought in free education. This is nonsense. I mean, the fact of the matter is that even when he supposedly brought in free education, people still paid school fees. You no longer pay school fees, only until the Benny Marama government did it, and now the Fiji First government is continuing with that. That's what you call true free education from that perspective. So money's been allocated. Health, of course, is getting funding, and we're getting a new maternity hospital in CWM, and of course, in Kayasi, building a subdivisional hospital, in various other places, Vale Levu will get new hospitals. So it's about the capacity. It's not just necessarily about the lump sum of money itself.
Are there other plans to decentralize the health sector?
Yes, I mean, one of the initiatives, as you know, that we announced also, excuse me, is apart from the decentralizations of Vale Levu, Kayasi, and various other places, we're also looking at from the 1st of Jan, where you can actually use through what we call the capitation system, go to a GP and we'll pay for that. So we recently had a team of our, from Ministry of Economy, from the Medical Ministry of Health, and also from the Reserve Bank. We visited, facilitated, I'm grateful for the assistance by the Australian High Commissioner. We went and visited and looked at the Medicare system. We've also had some experts from ADB, who is a very good person who's working with us at the moment. So essentially, in short, what it will mean is that if you live, for example, in Samambula, there will be various GPs that are identified. You'll be assigned the various GPs that you can go to. And then, so rather than going to CWM or your health center, if you got the flu, you wake up in the morning, you can go to the doctor and he'll see you or she'll see you, give you a prescription if need be, and whatever, do the diagnosis, and we'll pay for that. It puts less pressure on the public health system. So you go to the public health system when there's some complex matter and it's an emergency.
Looking at the government's initiatives to help out those who are suffering with cancer, you've also set aside $2 million for dialysis machines, given that most of my family members do happen to have some sort of affliction. This is obviously a wonderful, wonderful initiative. Do you see this continuing on further on with other governments, should Fiji First not get elected?
Well, let's not talk about who's going to not going to elect or get elected, but I think the point of the matter is this. Firstly, dialysis is not for cancer. Dialysis is basically
for diabetes.
In terms of your renal failure, etc.
Yes.
Now, what we have said is that there's been obviously a lot of talk about it. In the opposition, people have been talking about, we'll give $20 million, $30 million. The reality is, again, life is all about balance. If you, for example, say we'll make dialysis all free, so for the rich, for the poor, and everybody, then people can become also very, irresponsible about it. So might as well eat sweet things, get dialysis, your kidney fails, they'll pay for it in any case. That's one extreme. What we've said under this initiative, that we're setting up 2 centers. One that's been identified in Nandera, and the other one's in Nandi. We're going to buy new machines. We're hoping to have this up and running by October. And we'll provide those services at $150 a visit. However, if your income level again is less than $30,000 in the household, we'll pay for 50% of the cost. And it's not just for those 2 places. There are other kidney dialysis centers in Fiji that also charge $150. For example, at Lambasa Hospital, we have the board of visitors that actually run the program. They use the government premises, they use the government nurses, but they charge $150. So if you go there, we'll also pay 50% of the cost. There may be others that charge $150. Of course, there are some who've actually set it up as a business. So there's one of them that charges $250. We're not going to pay the subsidy for $250. will pay the subsidy 50% at places where they charge $150. We have to be very careful also. There are some of the people who actually don't have good standards. We've had people, for example, there's one particular facility, I understand it was in the West, where they put a port under the skin where they actually have to do the dialysis through, they put the tubes, etc. It got all infected. So we have to make sure that we have standards. We have only one nephrologist in all of the Pacific, and the good doctor, of course, is working with us now, Amrish, and we also will set up a kidney center too. We've allocated $200,000. There was $1 million set aside for in 2017-2018 budget. We had some issues with the land. Now the land has been secured, and we'll start the planning works for that too.
We'd like to get into some more ministries, specifically the new allocations for the Ministry of Agriculture, but all of that right after the break. Welcome back. In the 2018-2019 national budget, you announced that a new initiative or incentive for the agricultural sector was a 0% tax on certain imported products. Could you explain more on that?
Oh yes, these are the fruits and vegetables that we normally import from overseas.
You're aware that there are claims that this will affect the local agricultural sector?
No, we don't believe it will. I mean, we don't grow apples in Fiji. We don't grow grapes in Fiji at commercial level. Some people may have some bigger backyard. Some people say they have 1 or 2 grapes in the plant, but in the tree, but it doesn't affect that. I mean, we've got other things like strawberries and various other things, celeries. Yes, there may be some locally grown celeries, but at the moment they aren't able to meet even the local demand. Mm-hmm. So most of the hotels, for example, imported. A lot of local people actually who have small businesses imported. Of course, ordinary households actually go and buy it from the supermarkets. In fact, the duty a few years ago used to be 32%. We brought it down to 5%. Mm-hmm. And then of course we've now reduced it to 0%. We believe that ordinary families need to be given access to these types of fruits and vegetables, etc. And it's not going to bust the bank for us by reducing it from 5% to 0%. The same way we reduce duty on tea from 5% to 0%. A lot of people drink tea. Again, it's not going to bust the bank. You'll see from the budget we have not done too many changes to tariffs. Mm-hmm. There's only 1 or 2 items we've done. For example, with cars, we have an age limit because we don't very old cars in Fiji. There's a 5-year age limit. Then what we found was that there are some car dealers who are bringing in cars that was about 4 years and 11 months and just landed it just to make the 5-year. But of course there are newer cars available. So to encourage people to import newer cars, we made an announcement to say that should you import a car that's 2 years or younger, then the duty will be halved from 32 to 15%. In the same way we've been giving concessions for taxi drivers. When you bring in a car for taxi purposes, you pay a lower rate. So again, if you bring in a car for taxi purposes, less than 2 years or younger, you again pay half of that, or whatever you're paying at the moment, 15 to 7.5%. So this is the ways that we've done the change in terms of tariff, but essentially we have not sort of done many changes because we believe, and I think this is one of the successes of the Bainimarama government, the Fiji First government, is that consistency in policies. We don't do chop and change, mm-hmm. make sort of widespread sort of claims, etc. Mm-hmm. And the businesses, the investors, our trading partners, our development partners, all actually like that. This is why we have 9 years of unprecedented growth.
You said that there's not been too many changes made. However, you have introduced 2 new ministries, one being the Ministry of Housing and Community Development and also the Ministry of Waterways and Environment. Looking at the Ministry of Housing and Community Development, you've also given an incentive to those who's going to be first home owners. And Rambuka himself has said that, sort of contradicted himself, saying that it's not good, but at the same time it's also good in the sense that people weren't able to do that before. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, firstly, I have to correct you. We have not done that many changes as far as tariffs are concerned. That's what I mean. I was talking about tariffs. This is about the Ministry of Housing, the realignment. We've created 2 new ministries. One is the Ministry of Housing and Community Development. The other is Ministry of Environment and Waterways. Now, Ministry of Housing and Community Development, the reason why we've done that is because at the moment, there are different ministries doing things as far as land development, squatter development is concerned. The Minister for Lands does it, the Minister for Local Government does it, and the Minister for Provincial Development does, the 1/3, 2/3 contribution that you can have and build rural homes. We now housed it all under one roof. They'll become effective from 1st of August. But we've also made allocations. We had first home buyers, what we call first home buyers scheme. We started a few years ago. We've now nuanced it further, fine-tuned it. So now we have a category of people who earn between $50,000 and $100,000. So they've been allocated funding for that. We'll give $10,000 if you you're building a first home, $5,000 if you're buying your first home. You go through a normal bank for that. We also have a category of people who earn less than $50,000. We've also, giving funding for them. We're giving them increased funding per allocation because they need more money. So that's to help them. Because you see, the rate of home ownership in Fiji is very low. We need to increase the rate of home ownership. Mentality in Fiji is that you tend to buy a first home when you're about, in the mid-30s, 40s, etc. We need people, say for example, a young student coming out of school, they've got their first job. We want to make housing available for them. We want them to actually buy a flat, a strata title apartment, or even a house for that matter, and make it easier for them. Because the moment people start owning homes, they become economically empowered. Mm-hmm. They have an asset. They become mainstream in the financial system. So a lot of people in Fiji at the moment, you're surprised how many people go to money lenders. They need $3,000, $2,000, $1,000. They go to a money lender because mainstream banks won't lend to them because one of the things they ask for is, do you have an asset that we can mortgage? So if the moment they own a house, they can actually use that as collateral too and build upon that collateral. So that's one of the things that we have done in respect of building up that ministry. And also the other thing that we've done is also we're allocating funding for people to purchase their first land. There are a lot of people actually, they may be a vegetable seller, they may be a low-income person. They have identified land. The TLTB is willing to lease them land, but they need $10,000 or $12,000 premium to buy the lease. Mm-hmm. So we want to encourage them to buy the lease. You buy the lease, they get a 99-year lease. They're able to then build a concrete home. Mm-hmm. Because those people who actually squat or who live in Waka Vanua arrangements, they don't build permanent homes because they know that the legal possessory rights may not be that secure. The moment they actually have a proper lease, the banks use that as a collateral. The banks can mortgage that. Then you build a nice concrete home, doesn't get blown away in the cyclone. These are sort of spilling effects of what we're trying to do. We also, lastly, just on that housing one, which I think is a good announcement, is there are a lot of people, for example, who have been, it's been told to them, you can get a lease, living on the land, but we need to get the land surveyed. The moment you get the land surveyed, then you get a full lease. A lot of them cannot afford it. We had an allocation to actually fund those people to get their surveys done so they can get a proper lease again.
When we come back in our next segment, we'd like to discuss something that's been dominating headlines for the past few days. That's the NBF saga. But all of that right after this. Welcome back. So recently, Mr. Rumbuka has denied claims that he was responsible for the collapse of the National Bank of Fiji, attributing it to the previous governments, which would be the Labour-NFP coalition. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's a bit rich to be saying that because the NFP-Labour coalition in 1987 was there for only 4 weeks. As you know, then he carried out the coup. He carried out 2 coups in 1987, in May and in September. And of course then, he essentially was running the show for all intents and purposes. Then of course then under the 1990 constitution, which was a very skewed and racist constitution, under which he got elected, he then was a prime minister. It was during this period that the NBF actually went downhill. In fact, he was the one under his orders where you had a branch manager of Samambula branch, Makrava, who walked in with a group of soldiers and removed the general manager of NBF and overnight became the general manager of NBF for the whole of Fiji. These are the kind of shenanigans that went on. And of course, as we all know, the saga that took place after that, people are walking in with pieces of paper, with authority from ministers to give them a loan. There's a whole book that's actually been written on this. And in fact, if I knew you were going to talk to me about that, I would have brought the book along with you that actually makes those observations. And of course, it was under his prime ministership that actually the bank went under. We lost our only national bank. It is actually quite sad because every country should have at least one completely domestically owned bank. Since then, we have not had that. And in fact, it's only under the leadership of Honorable Voreqe Bainimarama that we actually now have our only 100% owned bank, which is HFC, owned by the Fijian people. Predominantly, the shareholders are in FNPF.
Looking at the collapse of the NBF, the debt that was accumulated since then, in real terms now, how much is it?
In fact, I had the figures, but what I can tell you is actually created what we call an intergenerational debt. In other words, the people of Fiji are still paying for it. Now, this is not, they're not paying for a debt that was accumulated because they built a highway, or they built a hospital, or they built a school, or built a series of schools. This was a debt that was completely unwarranted, where the National Bank collapsed. It's different if you say, okay, he accumulated debt because he built this 4-lane road or provided electricity to people as we are doing today or brought in water. No, it was a debt that actually could have been avoided. We had to actually, rescue the bank. I've heard various stories from him saying, I rescued it from collapse. What nonsense. The reality of it is that happened post-87. And the reality of it is that he was the person behind the scenes that actually gave various instructions.
We're nearing the end of our show, so I'd like to ask you the burning question. Will For the Record be the first show to reveal the election date?
Absolutely not.
Well, you've speculated that we've speculated rather, it could be any time in September, given that you've said it would be before October. Is that correct?
No, we never said that. The reality is that the election date is the prerogative of the Honourable Prime Minister.
Well,
The Honourable Prime Minister chooses the date, and then of course he discusses it with His Excellency our President, who then in turn issues the writ. What I can tell you is that the date the writ is issued by His Excellency the President, exactly on the 45th day thereafter, the elections are held.
well, that's fair enough. Looking at the manifesto of Fiji First, when do you expect that to come out then?
It will come in time to come.
Do you expect it to reflect the budget as well?
The manifesto, when it comes out, you'll see what's in it.
Okay, well, looking at Fiji First government and all the progress that it's made in the previous years, is there any work left for the government itself to go into this election and hoping to win it, to carry on with those works?
Sorry, I don't understand your question.
Beg pardon, I'll rephrase that. With all the work that's been done in the past few years by Fiji First government, with the elections that's coming up, should Fiji First win, is there pending work that you'd like to carry on with?
I think no government's work ever stops. I mean, it'd be, whether it's incumbent or whether it's incoming government, no government's work ever stops.
Thank you very much for coming on For the Record. That's all we have for tonight. We hope you enjoyed the show for tonight. Until we meet again, good evening.